You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you a little bit about our current sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. As you well know, if you've been following This is Oklahoma, they've been a huge part of this podcast. So this podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode, coming to you with part 2 of our interview with TW Shannon. Mate, thanks for having me back. Been about a couple of weeks, right? And we've probably traveled a little bit, but glad to get back on the schedule. I know you're a busy man, and excited to kind of finish up our chat. I think the last time we sat down, we just got finished, or we were just starting to talk about kind of like your involvement with the bank. And, you know, before we did get into all that stuff, you know, we talked about you walking in and meeting with the leader of the free world, right? And kind of how cool that feeling is, regardless of who that man is or whatever people think of that man as a position in general. When you walk in to meet the leader of the free world, like that's a pretty awesome experience. And you shared some great stories about that. But coming back to like working at, you know, getting the position at the bank and the impact that you mentioned, you know, the stats that you laid down. I mean, it's a huge impact that you guys have had, and, you know, coming towards the end of a year that was uncertain for a lot of people, you know, with the loans. I know you mentioned, you know, you guys were of the few first ones, you know, first movers to agree to that and to go forward with it and kind of, you know, trust that it would work out, and also like work for your community and you know, just kind of give them what they deserve, really. That was really cool to hear. But for part 2, I kind of like, you know, touch a little bit more on, you know, the bank itself and the social media stuff that you do and the marketing. And I think you just go at it a different way compared to a lot of other businesses and other banks and stuff. And tell me a little bit about kind of like, you know, why I guess you value the importance of, you know, the marketing side via social media and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I think part of it really lies in the fact that I have kind of a pretty unconventional path to being CEO of a bank, right? I didn't grow up in the finance world. I didn't grow up kind of in the banking world even. Now, I've had a chance to, when Governor Anatubby called me and asked me about being a part of the bank, I told him, I said, you know, I've never run a bank before, right? And I think I mentioned that. Yeah. And he said, yeah, but we wanted somebody who understands, you know, who understands relationships and leadership. And I'd certainly done a lot of that. So I thought, all right, I'll apply the task at hand. And so I think that perspective is different from other bankers, right? Because I don't really think inside the box. Right. I'm not limited to that. Now, honestly, the first, you know, probably 6 to 9 months, you know, there was some insecurity for sure. Growing pains. But I learned very quickly that, you know, the skill set that I've been blessed with through my life experiences and work experiences, that a lot of that skill set was transferable. And you know, building a team, in empowering people, encouraging people, that's what we do. Mm-hmm. And then also recognizing the storytelling piece. I see social media as an extension of storytelling. I think people that do things well are great storytellers. I mean, you think about, you know, the people that have really made an impact and a difference. You know, it's not just that Steve Jobs was a smart guy, right? Mm-hmm. He was a smart guy, yes, but he also was able to tell a story. He was able to help people connect on a level that was very different than just the nuts and bolts of building a cool invention. It was more than that. It was what are these called when you wear it was the hoodie, right? It was the different culture at Apple, working for Apple became. So it wasn't just the product, it was the culture surrounding the product. Mm-hmm. And I think CEOs have an opportunity to be good storytellers. And I think the Chickasaw people, Native Americans in general, we're Oklahoma's first storytellers. And so telling the story about what's great about that's happening at this bank and what's happening in our community, I'm happy to do it, and I use every opportunity we can to do that.
Right. And I mean, to that point, like being a great storyteller, like I think you as well, like you just mentioned, have embraced that because, you know, you have your own personal brand, right? I don't know any other bank CEOs that have their own personal brand or their own personal logo even, right? That they actually put out there, right? I mean, some may have one and they might put it in their golf bag and say that's cool, but, you know, you have your own personal brand, and I think, you know, from that perspective, like that's a cool thing to have, but you embrace that, right? Like that's,
yeah, there's no doubt I have the biggest ego in the room, right? Right. That's just the way. No, honestly. So someone asked me that about the other day about humility, and they said, "Yeah, you seem like a pretty humble guy. What do you do?" I said, "Listen, being humble is pretty easy for me because I know me. I know the real me. I go home with me. So if you knew me as well as I do, you'd be humble too." But, no, I do think you know, we all do have a brand, you know, and you know, having been in some pretty high profile positions before, I'm probably more acutely aware of my brand maybe than some, because I've had to think about it as a living. When you're an elected official,
right,
that matters. I mean, it's part of the legislative process, and so my brain naturally goes there. But I think the way that you kind of keep that in check, because I think you do got to do a personal ego check every now and then, make sure you're not just out there trying. I think it's, what's your motivation? And if your motivation is to really build better lives, like we commit to do here at Chickasaw Community Bank, if it's really about helping people and providing a hand up to people around you and hoping that people around you succeed and do well, I think it's all worth it. And I think storytelling is part of it. And that's all that branding really is. It's what's your story. And everybody has one. Everyone's unique. I got to be honest, I'm always fascinated that people take interest in when people do take interest in my story, because I think like everybody, we think, well, my story is just my story. It just happened, but it's unique to everybody. Like I'm fascinated by your story, coming here from a different country, staying for a girl. I mean, you know, it's a classic story of a boy meets girl, but it's the intricacies and the people involved and the twists and turns and the disappointments in that story that really provide the color and the texture, and more importantly, the lessons. Those are the lessons. Like there are lessons in people's story, which is why that's the appeal of podcasts, right? It's hearing people's stories and extrapolating what's the lesson in that story. It's not just, stroking ego. Let me tell you about how great I am. Because frankly, that wouldn't take. It certainly wouldn't take 2 episodes, much less one. We could do that in probably about 30 seconds for me. But I certainly got a story to tell. It hadn't always been roses and you know, it hadn't always been rainbows and unicorns. Like my social media would tell you. You know, I always tell my family, we want to be the people that we post about on social media, because those people have no problems. They're smiling all the time. Life. Everything's great. So we strive to be those people, but we know we're not, and that's all part of the story. And you're right. It's just having that awareness, right? That, like, you know, it's not all perfect, and you learn so much from the lessons that come from the struggles and disappointments, whatever that may be. You know, everyone struggles with something, just on a different scale, right? To the point of having like a personal brand, and you mentioned coming from being in politics and coming from, you know, being an elected official, and continuing that then through being, you know, working with the bank and being the CEO of the bank. Do you see the personal brand as, like, I guess, playing the long game, maybe? Potentially going back into politics after, you know, but I mean, you could have come into the banks. What I'm getting at is, like, you could have come into your current role and just been like, my personal brand thing, I don't need it so much, right? I actually did. So it's funny you mentioned that. That's exactly where I thought. I thought in my own kind of mind of wanting to measure up to being a bank CEO and wanting my colleagues and my direct reports to take me seriously. I really tried to hide from that, almost pretend like that part of my life, the public elected official, that didn't exist. I wanted to get as far away from that as possible. And then we had the idea of, when we were really starting, we rebranded the bank to Chickasaw Community Bank, and we actually hired a consultant who came in, and we were asking him, how do we grow our presence. It wasn't just social media presence.
Yeah.
It was really, how do we establish the brand name of the bank? And they made 2 recommendations to us. The first one was, they said, you should change your name. Bank 2 is not a very good name.
Yeah.
It's a sucky name.
Right.
And I thought, well, I agree with that. And they said, what do you think would be the most impact that would represent who you are? And I said, Chickasaw Community Bank. I thought, the Chickasaws have done a great job with branding. It's who we are. It's who we strive to be. It sets a standard. And then the other thing that they told us was, when they said, when you're growing your market share and how do you establish that brand and what that means, they said, well, what about your CEO? The consultant said, you have 2 types of CEOs in the world, right? You've got the Steve Jobs model, where the persona of that leader is built into the brand of the company. It's part of it. The company kind of leads with that. And you've got others like Jeff Bezos, who he's kind of come into more of his own now. Right. But most people didn't know who he was. Bigger, more powerful, more influential company, but no one had any clue who the guy was. And both models work well. But when we started looking at social media, the consultant said, well, listen, we're going to be starting from scratch with the bank because the bank had no presence. Why don't you leverage, because I had, I think, 50,000 something, maybe, total across media is maybe close to 100,000 different followers or fans, whatever they're called. And he said, why don't you leverage that? And there was a real point of, I don't know. Like I'd spent the last year and a half trying to convince people that, I was more than elected official, that didn't exist. And he said, no, lean into it. Like, this is part of who you are. It is part of your brand. You can't get away from it. Yeah. And so we did that. We leaned into it. And so I use a lot of my social media to leverage it for the bank. I want people who tune into me because I'm this, crazy right-wing conservative. I want them also to know I'm this crazy right-wing conservative who, by the way, could make you a really great deal on your home loan, or could really, help you grow your business with some of the products we have there. So it is a bit strategic, but it sometimes it does feel a little. I got to admit, sometimes it's a little embarrassing because we'll go places and people are kind and polite and they want to talk about that and that's fine. And I've just learned to just own it as part of who I am. But I've also been very clear, like I mentioned earlier, I had wonderful parents who really grounded me, and I've always been very clear. If I have a superpower, it's that I've never allowed what I do to define who I am. It's not. It's separate. What I do is what I do. What I do for a living is what I do, what I partake in. And sometimes those are successful. Most time they're not. And when they are, you celebrate it. And when it's not, you learn the lesson from it. But ultimately, I'm T.W. Shannon. I'm a guy who's been blessed with some amazing opportunities. And that first one was being born in the greatest, freest country in the world, and then second to that was being born, and I think is the greatest state. I think Oklahoma is an amazing state, a young state. We're a young state and a small state with really big dreams, and because we're still a new state. We have a real opportunity to as younger adults, as middle-aged adults now, we still have an opportunity to help chart that course for our state. And that part motivates me.
Back to what you said about kind of what name stands out to you, and you threw out the Chickasaw Community Bank, which makes so much sense, right? Because of the impact, right, that the tribe has had and the brand that the tribe's had. You could not just, most people would think of the ballpark, right? But there's so much other stuff that goes on to it. What for you, I guess, growing up, and having this brand and this being a part of the tribe growing up, like, what was your kind of view and just kind of, because you've grown up with it, right, as well, of just, kind of in the modern era of social media and the internet is what I mean from that. Like, what has it been like from your perspective, just watching it grow and being a part of it, and now having, like I said, being you didn't think you'd be a CEO of the bank with a name on the door, right? So
it's amazing. I remember as a kid. So my Chickasaw roots come from my father, and it's through his mother, my grandmother, and she was adamant that we be aware of our Chickasaw identity. Even though most of my family is not very identifiable Chickasaw, she was very adamant that we knew about that heritage and that it was a part of our life, and that our tribe. I remember her whenever someone was born in the family, she was adamant that we were enrolled members of the Chickasaw. It wasn't enough just to be Chickasaw. Yes, you're born, with the heritage that you have,
right.
But tribal membership is a political designation, and she made sure. And oftentimes, and we were like, why? What's the now there's some tangible benefit to being Chickasaw for many people, but for her at the time there really wasn't a tangible benefit. It was more of a heritage celebration. She knew that heritage, and she made sure that we as grandkids and kids did, even sometimes when we didn't see the importance of it. You didn't care. And then it was amazing as I got older to recognize how Chickasaw values were a part of my life more than I thought. How Chickasaw, even diet, some of the foods that we ate, I didn't know they were Chickasaw meals and dishes. I didn't know that they were I just thought they were my grandmother's deal. But I also had a unique experience. When I was in law school, the tribe was very helpful with scholarships for me. I mean, me and my wife, we couldn't have existed. We got married when I was in law school. We couldn't have existed without the support of the tribe. I mean, it made a difference. And then certainly when I was running for office, a lot of I had worked at the Chickasaw Nation, and a lot of the executive team and management team and frontline workers were a big part of my election and supporting me. And so when I got a chance to come work at the bank, when Governor Anatubby called me about coming to work here, and we had a conversation, after I got off the phone, the thing that went through my mind more than anything was, okay, this is the first opportunity where I can actually make a contribution back to the tribe. The tribe had given so much to me and been such a part. I've been such a benefactor of all of Governor Anatubby's wonderful leadership, that this was I felt like the first time where I could actually contribute something. And so to me, getting here and focusing on the bottom line and earning a dividend and paying that dividend to the tribe, or reinvesting back into the bank and growing the bank's market share, I do it as a proud Chickasaw citizen because it means so much more, because we're actually making a contribution. And oh, by the way, the great part about that, I know that many people, sometimes that can feel exclusive because you're not a tribal member. Right. But the reality is, all of the benefit that comes from the Chickasaw Nation financially, it all gets reinvested back into the tribal government, which happens to be in Oklahoma. So the state benefits when the Chickasaw Nation does well. So it's an amazing opportunity. But again, for me, it's more than just earning a paycheck. I mean, it really is. It's like it's almost like the family business, It's like I know that if this bank does well and we make and even though on the grand scale of things, we're a small community bank, compared to WinStar or some of the other, amazing healthcare facilities, or, we're a real small contributor. But my goal, honestly, my personal goal is I want this bank to be the biggest contributor. I want us to contribute a bigger dividend than WinStar. We got a long way to go. But that is my goal, because I believe so much in the mission of building better lives for everyone and advancing the overall quality of life of the Chickasaw people. That's ingrained in me, and it's a privilege to sit in this seat and feel like you're making a difference.
Right. Yeah. And then, like I said, you go back to you had no idea why your grandma was putting this plate in front of you and what it meant, right? And now you do. And you're right, having that moment, wow, this is the first time I actually get to give back, and a lot of people don't get that opportunity, right? Or they might get that opportunity and it's in totally different ways. It might be just by volunteering or whatever it is, but it's really cool for you to just hear you speak about that, right? It's kind of like a hair on the back of your neck moment.
Sure. I'll tell you a funny story real quick. As a kid, I remember we were down. So my great-grandparents, who I got to know, they lived and they were Chickasaw. Their allotted lands, Chickasaw lands, we are still in the family, and we would go down every year. But this was a kid. They were actually, my great-grandparents were still living, but I was down with my grandmother, and I remember we were walking, and they still owned, I think they had still about 40 acres of the 160 that they were allotted. We were walking, and I remember her reaching down and picking up what I thought was grass and eating it. She just kind of wiped it off and was eating. And I thought, oh my gosh, I must have been like 7 or 8, and I thought, Grandma's losing her marbles. She's like eating grass. And I later learned that she was eating poke salad. She loved poke salad, and she loved raw vegetables. Anyway, poke salad, I don't know if you're familiar, it's a wild green.
Okay.
And it's a pretty popular Chickasaw dish that my grandmother would prepare.
Yeah.
I didn't like most kids. I didn't like green vegetables. I didn't know them. I thought she was just losing her marbles and eating grass. Come to find out, she liked poke salad. She liked it fresh. So we were out walking. She saw some. She wiped it off, and she would chew it and eat it and pick it. And it's those just kind of rare moments where you realize that was a very Chickasaw thing to do. Most people don't walk around eating raw poke salad, right? But it comes full circle later on when I'm reading about Chickasaw culture, and I get the calendar that we get every year from the Chickasaw Nation, and it lists the poke salad meal. Like, it took me back to that feel with my grandmother. I'm thinking it was a very Chickasaw thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at the time you're like, she's going nuts.
Yeah. That's right.
She's losing her mind.
That's right.
Like, I'm gonna tell your parents, like, Grandma's doing that thing again.
Now, in full disclosure, I got to be honest. I don't really like poke salad. It's kind of a bitter.
But that
green.
memory, though, it's special
the memory.
The memory's super special.
And I try all the Chickasaw dishes. Some of them, pashofa. Some others, you just the grape dumplings I like.
Yeah.
But
one of the things that I think mutually between us, like, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame is a huge part of both our lives, right? With me, with the podcast, and obviously yourself and the Chickasaw have done so much for the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. I'm curious to know why, but also, like, you have a personal interest in the Hall of Fame because your daughter's on the teen board, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. She is.
So like, it's so special to have such, an impact, but also such a contributor like the nation, right?
Yeah.
To do what they do, and they're always doing great things for the Hall of Fame. So from your perspective, I mean, why do you think that's so important? And then also, like, why is your daughter a part of the teen board as well?
Well, a couple of things. So, as I'm on the board of the Hall of Fame, and as a board member, it's one of the great privileges of a lifetime for me to serve on that board, because, again, I'm big into storytelling. I think it's one of our greatest assets as humans, frankly, and that is what the Hall of Fame is all about. And as I mentioned, the Chickasaw people, Native Americans, are Oklahoma's original storytellers. And so I think it's only befitting that Governor Anatubby, I think he is the most visionary leader of our lifetime, and maybe of Oklahoma's history. The fact that he sees that vision and the importance of storytelling and continuing that mission, I see a lot of irony in that he would see that vision, but it's of no surprise to me. And so, telling that story, knowing who you are, I remember reading a book. One of my favorite reads during college was the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. And Frederick Douglass, he spends a lot of time fascinated, in the beginning particularly, about the difference between being born free and being born a slave. And he says the biggest difference between being a man who's born free and a man born a slave is a person who's born a slave doesn't know where they came from. They don't know their history. They don't, and as a result, they don't have anything that they have to live up to. He said, when you're born free, you have a heritage, you have a link, you have something either to live up to, or some things that you want to change about your destiny. And so the value of knowing your history is so important, and I'm glad for people like Shannon who shepherd in an amazing way the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, but even the visionaries and the patriarchs of our state who saw the importance of having an Oklahoma Hall of Fame, because it does indeed tell the story in a unique way. And that's why I was so excited. My daughter was interested in serving on the team board because, again, that's the next generation of that storytelling. And Oklahoma's history is amazing, and sometimes it's easy maybe to discount it because it's such a short history, right? Compared to, Boston or other, or that's one city, but you think about other, older civilizations even. In America, in Oklahoma, if it's 100 years old, that's pretty. It's ancient. Pretty ancient, right? You go to the East Coast, 300 or 400 years is old. You go to Europe, 1,000 years. You go to the Middle East, you go to the East, we're talking thousands and thousands of years. So it's easy to maybe to discount the richness of Oklahoma history if you don't know it. But when you really look at it, it is so fascinating and so unique and so intertwined with Native people. And so the fact that Governor Anatubby has seen the value of supporting such an organization, I think it only speaks to how important it is. And the fact that my daughter, who's also Chickasaw, is now on the team board, she sees the value. She's going to learn the story in a real way, and that's why it's so important.
Yeah. We obviously, we talk about the tribe's impact, but one of the huge things that happened this year, right, is the first American Museum. And finally, then launching the plans to what that land is now going to become, and the museum is just going to be the center of that, with the hotel complex coming and just everything about that. And no doubt you've known about this for quite some time, but like the rest of us now, we saw that announcement, the plans, and now the museum's open. Because it was just every time you drive by it, like, well, when's it going to open? Like, what are they doing? What's the land? What's going on? And I personally, I didn't know the significance of I thought when you drive past it, I'm like, why is there a giant land? Why is there all that massive hump of grass in the way, spoiling the view of downtown? Well, it's not the reason, right? There's a significant reason for that with the way the sun sets and that stuff. So, what's it like for you to be excited, to have this museum to be open and be able to use it and the way you do, and just kind of what does that mean to you?
Well, it's a long time coming, right? And, having served in the legislature, I kind of know a lot of the history and how to, was even involved. I ran legislation at times to support the museum, and as speaker, we oversaw some legislation that would have benefited the museum and been involved in some of the fundraising. So, I think it's the crown jewel of our state. We in Oklahoma, we market ourselves as Native America, right? I mean, that people still, when you ask them about Oklahoma, they want to see that cowboys and they want to see the Indians, and they're a little surprised when they get here and they show them a picture of me that I'm, that I fit that. It's not exactly the image they had, but it is part of our identity. Yeah, and I think that the FAM really encapsulates that that identity, and is that really what's the word that I'm looking? It's an icon. It's an icon of who we are as a civilization. It tells the story of the 39 tribes that have been here, and to finally see it. And even there's also some irony, and I haven't seen anybody really capture this, but the fact that that museum went through so many. I mean, it usually doesn't take 20-something years to get something built, right? Usually after 20 years, somebody says, forget it, kid, get out of here. But the fact that it was Governor Anatubby, I mean, let's be honest, that would not exist without his leadership and his commitment, just diligence, year after year, totally committed to seeing its opening and staying with it until it happened. It wouldn't have happened without his perseverance and his leadership. Again, the irony, and it so mirrors the story of Native Americans and the story of perseverance, where you've got a people who at one point it was illegal, it was against the law to be Native American, it was a felony, and how over and over there have been attempts to do away with tribal sovereignty, how it's been attempted to be wiped out or at least disrespected. Even now, we have instances where, there are political figures now who don't respect tribal sovereignty and have even taken issue with it. But the fact that Native American people are still here, they're thriving, we're growing, we're contributors to the society. It speaks very well of the culture and of the people. And I think the FAM, even the struggle of getting the FAM museum, like that in and of itself, I think mirror images a lot of the Native American people. And I hope one day, I went through it the first opening day, but it was kind of a quick, I really haven't had a chance to spend the real time I want to spend there. But I hope someone, captures that story. Because again, it's storytelling.
Yeah. And it's a cool building.
It is.
When you see it, you drive by and you see the photos of it. A mutual friend, a friend of mine, took some photos of it, Mel Willis, and she does amazing work. And I posted some of her photos, and she's like, "Yeah, I took those like a long time ago. It was been done, but still, it's amazing."
And you look at the development the Chickasaws are doing around it.
That's right.
Near almost $400 million is going to go in development around that district. I mean, it's just it is the crown jewel of Oklahoma, and I'm so proud to be Chickasaw, and so proud Governor Anatubby, his leadership, really is leading there.
Yeah. Talking, I guess, going into the future, what's kind of like, you don't strike me as someone who, listening to your whole story, you don't strike me as someone that's like, in 5 years, I'm going to be this. In 10 years, I'm going to be this, right? So for you, I mean, ideally, where would you like to be? What would you like to do, whether that's politically with the bank? I mean, what do you kind of see, maybe even just next year coming forward? And I guess the short-term plans that you do have.
Well, I want to see this bank continue to grow. Yeah. I mean, I really think we're making a difference in building better lives for everyone. It's not just a slogan here. I mean, you see us really impacting people's lives in a very positive way, and so I want us doing more of it. I want us to even to stretch our territory. I want us to grow territory, but I also want to see our people continue to grow and develop. I mean, we've got some stories here of people that we've hired. I think of one young lady who came to us. She had she had a challenging, early years of her life. She came here, wanted to work here. We gave her an opportunity. She's continued to advance. And like every time I see her, it almost brings tears to my eyes, because I think this is exactly, and like I have to refrain myself so I don't get all goofy and weird around her, make her feel uncomfortable, because I'm so proud of her and what she's accomplished and what this place means to her. And so I want to see us do more of that. On a personal level, man, in 5 years, I've got a daughter who's a junior right now. And I want to see her with lots of scholarships to pay for some college somewhere not too far. My son is in 7th grade, so I guess he'd be right there in Close 5 enough, years too. He'd be right there too. So I want to see him with even more scholarships, because it'll be more expensive when he gets there. So I definitely will be here in Oklahoma, and I'll always make a contribution. I mean, I can't listen. This country, this state has been too good to me. I've had amazing life experiences that a kid from Lawton, Oklahoma just shouldn't have had. And so I do believe, like the Chickasaw philosophy and the biblical teachings of to whom much is given, much is required. When you've been given as much as I have, and like I tell my kids, if you were born in America, you're born in a middle class family, you've got all your all your faculties about you. You don't have any physical or mental limitations. There's a lot expected of you. And so I'll definitely continue to make contributions in the public sphere and in the private sector. And, at what level, I don't know. I mean, you never know how those things work. But I certainly will make myself available. And I'll continue whatever I'm doing to be serving the people of Oklahoma and the people of the Chickasaw Nation. So.
Yeah. Finishing up then, you mentioned on a personal level, to go a little bit further and to get to know a little bit about you. Obviously, it's no secret that you dress well. You love fashion. We touched on this obviously in part 2. I mean, on just kind of like I said, a personal level, I think when we touched on in part 1, you mentioned there's a lot of personalities in the church growing up, right? You get your dress sense is muted compared to this, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm like the conservative,
But I mean, what I want to ask is I guess something for you, what do you like to go out and do when you're not working or not, doing, when you're just you, family, whatever it is, what are your interests? For me, it's golf, right? But for you, your cars and fashion, I mean, what kind of gets you going?
Fashion, I think more as a curse, honestly. It's my mom cursed me. She was such a a person of high fashion, and that I just naturally kind of picked up on it in style. And actually, early part of my career, I was an elected official. And so, you want to look the part, you want to look distinguished, I want to look older. And so a lot of that I kind of held back. But as you get older, being your authentic self is, what kind of shoes I have on or what kind of shirt I have on, that doesn't define who I am. And there's a real person there. I certainly don't want to look silly or flamboyant, but I've got some individuality, and I don't mind expressing it, and I'm certainly a lot more comfortable doing it now. But what I do for fun is not fashion at all. I actually don't enjoy shopping. But what I do for fun a lot is music. I'm a huge music buff. Okay. I mean, you follow me anywhere on social media, TW Shannon, you'll usually find me at some live concert, music performance, singing loud and being obnoxious. Like I'm not the person you want to sit behind at a live music performance. I'm just warning.
Well, you're not going to be able to stand behind you either.
You don't want to stand behind me. That's even worse. So, my wife and I, we spend a lot of time at music events, and right now, so much of the rest of our time, our weekends are usually with kid stuff now, whether it's my daughter's cheerleading or son basketball or track or cross country, and he said he's going to do soccer this year too, so that tends to take up a lot of it. But outside of that, usually traveling. I like to take family trips as a kid. My dad was always good about throwing us in a car and going to some state lodge, and so we're still making our trek. We do some RVing. This is at the end. So you caught me at the end of RV saying, so now I'm ready to sell it. I'm over it. I'm done. But I guarantee you in the spring, I'm like, I can't wait. We got to get out there. So it kind of runs this cycle. So RVing, music, and family stuff, that tends to take up most of my free time.
What's that? I mean, what are the songs on the playlist then? What music?
Man, so I love anything. I love gospel, like 90s, 2000 gospel, Kirk Franklin, Fred Hammond. That's kind of my go-to stuff, Yolanda Adams. I love, kind of old school R&B, anything Motown, 70s music. I love it. But I also, I like some of the standard stuff. I like Bublé and Frank Sinatra. I like some of the newer artists. I like The Weeknd. My son's got me listening. I try to keep up with the kids a little bit. I can't quite do Cardi B. I can't quite get into. I've never been a hip hop guy.
Once you find out exactly what she's saying, I can't do it either.
Yeah, it's just not. It's not my deal. But I respect artistry, and I try not to be too judgmental. I know old fogies didn't like my music either. So that's part of it. Definitely. But you'll always find Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston. I'm a kid of the 80s. You'll always find them. Prince is always on repeat. My kids say I like old people's music, so I like a lot of oldies. But I'm trying to think who else. Ariana Grande, I like some of the pop stuff. She's certainly talented. I like the legends. Dinah Ross is definitely one of my favorites. Lionel Richie. So really from that R&B kind of pop persuasion for sure. But I'll throw in a little Pavarotti every now and then, or some Mozart. My kids are very musical, and they stretch me a lot musically. But I'll even throw in some country. I mean, I can get some of the old school country, not the new country, but some of the old school. So it runs the gamut, but 90% R&B, old school classics.
Well, finishing up then, Christmas season is coming up. Obviously, we're recording this before Thanksgiving. 2 questions. When does Christmas start for you? When does the tree go up? When does everything start? And then the other question is, what is your favorite Christmas song?
So when does Christmas start? It depends. So we try to get the tree up before we try to have it up by Thanksgiving Day. And so sometimes when we're traveling, if we're traveling for Thanksgiving, we try to do it. But I actually got my lights up already at my house. So they're out and they're on. I posted it on social media last night. I said, I'm that guy. I'm the Griswold. And it's loud and it's obnoxious too. It's a lot of lights.
You love Christmas.
I do love Christmas. But I love Thanksgiving more. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. But I love Christmas too. I love the meaning of Christmas, where we're celebrating the birth of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. But I also love some of the kind of secular traditions of Christmas too. So you asked me about my favorite Christmas song. I love chestnuts roasting on an open fire. I like the traditional Christmas music. I like Bing Crosby, Nat King Cole. But Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas it's become a classic, right? It's become one of those too. So I like that one. I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas. Man, that's hard to say. My favorite Christmas song. I love Donny Hathaway.
Then. Yeah. Would it be instead of a song and the artist? Because there's you mentioned Sinatra, Bublé, like they've sang some fantastic Christmas songs, haven't they? I'm a Sinatra fan, so for me I prefer the classical Christmas rather than Mariah and the whoever.
Sure. Yeah, I saw you kind of roll your eyes when I said
not
Mariah.
A fan of Mariah.
You couldn't get.
I can't hide that. Yeah.
She's my wife's favorite, absolute favorite artist. I'd probably say favorite Christmas. Right now, I'll tell you my favorite Christmas album right now is the one that was put out last year by Leslie Odom. Okay. Leslie Odom, who was one of the leads in Hamilton. His Christmas album, I think he's like the eighth wonder of the world, and that album he did for Christmas is just phenomenal. So
I have to check that one out.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you, doing part 2 of the podcast and sharing some more stories, some more personal stuff, which everyone loves to know that stuff, right? The whole goal of the podcast is to find out, after reading the Banks bio or your bio, is to dive into the intricacies and tell the stories, about, your family, your grandmother eating, the what you thought was grass at the time, and growing up in the church and back to what we mentioned, earlier was, that they always knew that you were going to be in a position, right? The church always kind of told you you're going to be a person of influence, you're in a place of influence, which for most of them thought you'd be a preacher. No doubt,
absolutely,
you had the same thing, didn't realize you'd be, to where you are today. So I really appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing. I know there's a lot of people have learned so much about you in this podcast. And if they want to reach out, you mentioned the social media is a huge part of your life. But if people want to follow you and reach out, what's the best place to do it?
Absolutely. I'm on all my social handles are TW Shannon. And I also have a new website coming out, twshannon.com. So that'll be coming forth very shortly.
Social media can't censor that website for you like they might do on your Instagram, which I'll leave it at that. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, and for everyone listening, I'll post the links in the description, and we'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you.
This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling an Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.